Welcome back. So in today's video, we'll be discussing your cardiovascular health. A lot of times you hear different terms being thrown around. Sedentary behavior, cardiovascular activity, cardiovascular exercise. What do all these terms mean? And how do I get started? So in today's video, we'll go through sedentary behavior, cardiovascular activity, and the difference between activity versus exercise. And once we establish that, we'll create a routine and a plan for how to tackle this on your own. So let's get started. What is sedentary behavior? Sedentary behavior is, in other words, sitting. You sit to watch your show, you sit to eat, you sit to drive, you sit to work, you sit many different times throughout the day. Whether you're working, playing, doing different leisurely activities, a lot of our time is spent sitting down. And as you might guess, this can be harmful for our health as well. So, what are some excuses that you tend to hear? I'm too tired, I've had a long day, I really just don't feel like it right now. Maybe I'll do it later. Does that sound familiar to any of you? I know I'm guilty sometimes. So how can you tackle this? Some people, just understanding the benefits is a motivating factor to get them started. Other people may have different values inside them that will push them to get started. Whatever it is, try to find something that is meaningful to you so that your motivation is dependent on something that's concrete, solid, not something that shifts and fluctuates. So some benefits to reducing your sedentary behavior is, of course, reducing your risk factors for heart disease, you're preventing stroke, because as you sit down, you're more likely to form blood clots, and even osteoporosis and mental health as well. How do we do this? Well, we break up our sedentary time into chunks. So if you have a 12-hour shift and you're sitting for most of it, try to get up during the 12 hours. If you even have an 8-hour shift and you're sitting for most of it, try to get up more frequently. There are new studies constantly emerging, and lots of them are showing the effectiveness of getting up and moving and reducing your time sitting in long periods of time. This doesn't mean a workout, this doesn't mean a jog. It just means getting up and moving every once in a while. So if you want to put an app on your phone that reminds you to get up and move, go for it. If not, maybe motivate your colleagues and coworkers to, hey, let's get up, let's go for a walk together. All right, from here we're going to move on and discuss cardiovascular activity. What does that mean, cardiovascular activity? Isn't that like exercise? Well, not really. Cardiovascular activity is something that is not scheduled, that's not routine, but it is something that increases your heart rate, gets you going for a little bit. So, things like this would be your housework, your gardening, playing with your kids, going to the park with your grandkids, all of things like that that increase your heart rate for small amounts of time would be considered cardiovascular activity. And what's the difference between cardiovascular activity versus cardiovascular exercise? So exercise would be going one step further. Cardiovascular activity is not scheduled, not maintained, but exercise is. So cardiovascular exercise, on the other hand, would be a scheduled routine activity that is within an intensity that is maintainable, achievable for you, and something that you continually progress to work on your aerobic conditioning goals. So how do I do this? Where do I get started? I go into the gym and I feel overwhelmed as it is. I see the buff guys on the machines that all know what they're doing, the cardio people that all have their workouts planned, and then there's me. How do I get started? Is it okay that I'm just walking outside? Well, yes, walking is an exercise. So it's a matter of doing what you like best. And towards the end of the video, we'll show you a few different options that you have for yourself to get started. So, the easiest thing that you can do is try to pick your training heart rate range. And what does that mean exactly is how intense we want your heart to be working. Now, I do want to make a quick note that if you are a cardiac patient, if you've experienced any trauma to the heart, and you are going through any treatment plan for this in cardiac rehab, or you're seeing your family doctor or your cardiologist, please do not do this unless you are consulting with your healthcare providers. The reason being is you have a separate, very important and very specific exercise routine that's tailored to your needs and it's based off of your stress test results. This video is more for the general public who just want to get started with something light, that have not had a cardiac incident for them to be aware of. So I do want to make that point very clear. All right, so for us to do cardiovascular exercise, we want to check our training heart rate. Our training heart rate is the intensity that we want, the lowest intensity and the highest intensity that we want to be exercising for the duration of our aerobic training. So how do we determine this? Very easy, 220 minus your age. You must hear this thrown around a lot at the gym, and it's fairly accurate for those who are in the general public population. Again, if you're a cardiac patient, you would be doing a stress test to find a more specific and tailored approach. But for our purposes, we will go by 220 minus your age. So whatever that number is, you're going to take a percentage of that. So 70% to 85% of this maximum number that you just calculated will be your training heart rate. And that's a moderate to vigorous intensity. This is for the general public, so something that gets your heart going, but you're not dripping with sweat. Something that feels like an exercise, but is not like you're being chased by a tiger through the woods. So you want to have a good idea of, how intense an exercise feels, in addition to where your heart is performing at that intensity. And the perfect way to do that is to determine your training heart rate, 220 minus your age, and go by your feeling as well. All right, so in cardiac rehab, we tend to use something called the Borg scale. It's a scale of 1 to 10 based off how challenging you're finding the exercise. So 1 being super easy, I could be lying in bed, and that would be like a 1. 10 being, I'm going through the jungle being chased by a tiger. We want you between somewhere 3 to 5. So 3 is a moderate exercise, something you do, natural walk throughout your day. 4 would be somewhat strong, I'm rushing, I'm in a hurry to get somewhere. And 5 would be, it's a good workout, but I'm not dripping with sweat. Something like an 8 or a 9 would feel like a very intense test. For example, a maximal VO2 test, submaximal VO2 test, a stress test, things like that. You want to try and avoid those during your regular exercise routine, as that's a little too much stress for the heart to maintain for a regular exercise for the heart. So now we have our training heart rate. Awesome. We know what range we should start with, what range we should end with, how we should be feeling. How do we check our heart rate? That's pretty important, I'd say. So you take your hand, just do a nice open fist, like open palm like this. You're going to take 2 fingers, follow your thumb down to your wrist, and you should feel it along this section right here. It's like a slight beating sensation. If you don't feel it, you're not the only one. Lots of people struggle with it, but just be patient and kind to yourself and try it every day. You'll get there. Another way is to follow your pinky down to your wrist and feel it along the other side. And then in this manner, you're checking your radial and your ulnar pulse. So now that we've checked our pulse on our hand, a lot of questions that I get, well, can't I just use my carotid pulse? The answer is possibly yes. If you are confident and you are aware of how to track your carotid pulse, you can. But if it's something that you've never done before, that you're just learning now, that you're just trying out for the first time, maybe avoid trying to check. And the reason being, it can actually drop your heart rate too quickly if you're poking around in there for too long. So you got 2 other options right here to get you started. So most commonly, you'll see that people are able to check their pulse on radial, ulnar, or even on the other side. So if you're not finding it on your right hand, try checking on your left. You may find a stronger pulse in different areas. So be open, be patient, and be kind with yourself. And I promise you'll find it with time. Other options to check your heart rate, if you're not able to, or if you'd like some more security, you can either put a heart rate app on your phone, and you'll use your finger along the back of the flashlight, and the heart rate monitor will be reading your pulse through there. Another option would be investing in a smartwatch. Many people tend to have those, Fitbit, Apple Watch, Polar. The world is your option. Do your research, see what works in your budget, and what's the most accurate. And in terms of a heart rate monitor chest strap, Those tend to be the most accurate because this chest strap is right along your chest, and then you wear a watch to read your heart rate reading. So do your research, see what works best for you. Doesn't have to be the fanciest gadget out there. You could even do something as simple as a pulse oximeter. You can get those for 40, 50, 60 bucks, up to 300 and so. Pick something in your budget. All right, let's move into how long should I do this exercise? How often should I do this exercise? So we like to use the FIT principle. So frequency, intensity, time, and type. So the general guidelines for healthy adults is picking an exercise that's 5 to 7 days a week for your aerobic conditioning and training over time. This may not be a realistic goal for you right at the start. If you're someone who is just starting to get into walking, maybe start with 1 or 2 days. Maybe start with a 5-10 minute walk every day. Whatever works best in your schedule, whatever you're most willing to commit to and maintain over time, that's what you should start with. And with time, you'll work up into the 5 to 7 days a week. How about the intensity? So we briefly touched on both Borg scale. Remember, the Borg scale is a scale of 1 to 10 based off how challenging you're feeling, and our target heart rate by checking through our pulse. Both of those will determine your intensity that's ideal for you. I really encourage you to stick between the 70 to 85% of the 220 minus your age number. And then finally, you will go into the time and the type. So the time, typically we like to recommend 30 to 60 minutes on average. If you're not able to do all of those in one chunk of time, you can break it up into different time chunks. Just remember and keep in mind that the longer you're able to do a specific exercise, the more endurance you are building for yourself. So if you're only able to do 10 minutes every day, but you can commit to maybe 3 times a week of a half hour to an hour, try to commit to those 3 times a week of half an hour to an hour. Slowly build into it. It takes time. Maybe grab a buddy, bring some music, read a book. Of course, if you're maybe doing some intense aerobic training, don't read a book on the treadmill. Of course, be safe. And finally, the type. What should I do to do my aerobic training? Anything you like, whatever you enjoy. If you would like to use the treadmill, if you're a person who enjoys walking outside, if you're someone who enjoys cycling, in a moment we'll show you the bikes we have available in the Kylo Gym. There's even the elliptical, the step trainer, a recumbent bike. Many, many different activities that you can do to increase your heart rate within that training zone. As long as your heart rate is up within that zone for the specified time, you're doing exercise. Congratulations! Now you're on your way to success, to better health. I hope you found some helpful tips and tricks along this video that you can apply to your daily life. If you have any questions at all, feel free to contact us and we'd be happy to help. Take care. Bye-bye.